Good evening, everyone. I'm Byron Vandenberg, and tonight's talk is about dahlias. We're going to have a workshop. And I'd like to first start where I started my journey with dahlias, and it started 7 years ago. We had a trip to England, toured the botanical gardens, and went to this one in southeast England, Hever Castle Gardens, and just walked into this room. Basically, it was a garden room filled with dahlias. I'd never seen anything like it. And you could walk along the sidewalk and just, this is just a portion of the dahlias. And that night I Googled dahlias, and I wound up hitting dahlias.com, which is Swan Island dahlias, and started making a list of tubers that I wanted. Well, fortunately, we don't have to go that far away to see something this impressive. This is a row of dahlias along the outfield of the baseball diamond on campus. It's at the intersection of Hawkins Road and Elliott Drive. And this, again, is just a portion. They had the same kind of design with the border plants in front of it, you know, a nice barrier from the deer. And just amazing, it's right here in town. So the resources for the talk tonight are going to be a couple of really good books, both by suppliers. One is actually Floret Farms doesn't supply tubers anymore, but these are really two thought leaders in the area. Swan Island, Santa Cruz Dahlias on the left, Christine Albrecht, and on the right is Aaron Benzicane with Floret Farms. Also looked at a number of other sources, internet videos, internet websites, especially tried to stick with state agriculture extension services for information as questions came up to prepare for this. Just a little bit about history. Dahlias originated in the mountainous regions of Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Costa Rica. And they were also introduced into portions of South America. It was 1570 where information about what was going on here came out to Europe. Francisco Hernandez was sent to Mexico by King Philip of Spain to research the region's natural history. And we assume that dahlias were part of his descriptions of over 3,000 plants then unknown to Europeans. But it wasn't until 200 years later that another expedition returned to Mexico to complete his work, and dahlias now were among the plant material that was sent back to the Madrid Royal Botanic Gardens. These are three of the original dahlias that came back. These are in a book by Abbé Cavanil, a priest and botanist at the gardens. He named the dahlia in honor of Andreas Dahl, a Swedish scientist who had turned environmentalist. Horticultural growers of the day discovered that the dahlia was a natural hybrid, and when grown from seed, it readily changed its form and color, so that the timeline of cultivar development rapidly escalated. In the early 1800s, seeds and tubers from the early dahlias were dispersed. By 1808, double dahlias were first bred in Germany. By 1820, around 100 varieties had been cultivated. By the 1840s, 2,000. By the 1930s, 14,000, and now there are over 57,000 registered dahlia cultivars. But Dahlia Addict, which is recognized as the best database for dahlias, lists 3,100, and it's felt that mutations along the way led to unfavorable appearances and characteristics, and then they were lost. Well, with so many cultivars, a classification system was needed, and this is the classification of the American Dahlia Society. It's based on forms, colors, and sizes. And that helps us recognize the differences between the different dahlias. So just to take you through a few of the forms, the popular ones are the decoratives, which are formal and informal, the formal being where the petals are generally flat and broad and smooth, and they're usually curved upward. Informal, they're generally twisted, curled, or wavy. They vary in size. They may curl up, they may not. Water lilies are cup petals, rounded edges with flat sides, and they have a saucer shape from the side. Stellars have petals that are long and narrow along the length with pointed tips. Collarettes, generally flat, broad, and smooth. The balls and pom-poms are self-explanatory. They're just round balls. Pom-poms are very small, though. Straight cactus and semi-cactus, incurved cactus, these are all three that are characterized by narrow petals. They may be curved. The width at the base may be longer. And then finally, the laciniated are interesting because they're split at the tips. And seeing these different forms makes us appreciate the difference in variety even within one color. These are all dahlias, but you can see how the mixing of different forms adds interest, both in the garden and when cut. So now we'll talk about the care and growing dahlias. Fall is the time. I thought I'd start the seasons with the one we're in now. This is the time where we dig, divide, and store tubers, start our planning, think about soil testing. Dahlias are only winter hardy in zones 8 to 11 and annuals in zones 2 to 7. They're not hardy here because they're thin-skinned tubers and they're not bulbs. The time to dig tubers for winter storage is after a hard frost. And on the left is a dahlia field before, and after is, on the right is after a hard frost. And you can see just hard frost just kills everything. Now, the timing to dig after hard frost varies. Some say the traditional advice is wait 2 weeks after the hard frost. The thinking is that when the frost kills the top growth, the plant stops pulling water upward, the tubers are usually mature, but what comes next is not growth, but conditioning of the tuber. Over about 10 to 14 days, the outer cells toughen and dry just enough to form the winter skin. That's the thin corky layer that protects the tuber from dehydration and decay and storage. If you've stored dahlias, you know about the shriveling effect, and that's what we're trying to prevent with this next 14 days after the hard frost. Otherwise, the skins will be tender and full of water. If they're dug immediately after a frost, they'll tear easily and they'll store poorly. The actual trigger, though, is light. When day length drops below 12 hours, the plant hormones shift and tubers enter the growth phase, flower production slows, and the plant begins to channel carbohydrates from leaves down to the roots. That growth phase of 6 weeks is needed to mature, and the curing phase of 2 additional weeks after growth stops lends to that moisture redistribution in the tubers so that we have that cured skin. Opinions on timing the dig vary. Swan Island dahlias, they're fantastic teaching videos. Their thing is wait 2 weeks after killing frost or anytime after November 15th. And that's 6 weeks after daylight is less than 12 hours per day. That's just how the math works out. So the 12 hours of daylight starts to decrease in Iowa City on September 25th. So if you add 6 weeks to that, we wind up with that middle of November. However, others think that frost may be irrelevant to the tuber development, since growers in warm and tropical climates dig, divide, and store tubers without having a frost. Digging can start 75 to 90 days after the summer solstice, which is June 21st, and after beginning ground for a minimum of 4.5 months, so that digging can occur actually before frost happens here between late September and early November. So I'm just letting you know there's opinions vary. My personal opinion after having a lot of dehydrated tubers is to go with see if you can wait until 2 weeks after the frost. 4 to 6 weeks before digging tubers, decrease water frequency and stop fertilizing about 30 days before digging. We don't want flowers to grow. It's all about tuber development. So let's go into some little fine points about digging. Leave enough stem to facilitate handling the clumps easily when you pull them out of the ground. So leave about 6 inches from the soil. Preference is to dig up tuber clump soon after cutting the stems, because if one cuts a few days before digging, the eyes tend to come up so that the clumps are easier to divide accurately. But if water gets into that stem that's been sitting there open, the water can get into the crown because the stems are hollow. If one uses the same tool to cut all the stalks and leave the plants in the ground, the tool could spread virus from one plant to another. So the recommendation is, just as when we're cutting flowers, is to avoid spreading the virus, dip it into a dilute bleach solution. Removing the clump is done by digging on all four sides of the plant before pulling it out. Dig about a foot away because you'll be amazed at what the tuber spread is from that first tuber that you put in. When all four sides are loose from the longer feeder roots, push a shovel or tined fork out of the clump and lift it carefully. Remove the dirt, turn the clump upside down to drain any water that's in the stem, and start the cleaning. When ready to clean, use a garden hose to wash away as much dirt as possible, recognizing that you can easily damage the tubers, and once the neck is broken, the tuber is useless and it's non-viable. But even with throwing away non-viable tubers, we expect to get 3 to 10 tubers per plant. After cleaning, cut the roots, and then you're left with the tubers. But we have to cut these up. So it's first, I thought I'd just go with some basic anatomy. We have the body. You can see the body, the neck, the crown, and the eyes. And the eyes are where the sprouts are going to develop. Tuber size doesn't correlate with the ultimate size and strength of the plant. In terms of dividing, tubers, if you cut them and divide in the fall, they're easy to divide. They're easy to cut into. They're like a potato. But the eyes may be difficult to identify, so the tendency is to be not aggressive with trying to cut each crown apart. But if you store tubers as clumps and want to divide in the spring, the tubers will cut with more difficulty, but the eyes and sprouts will be easier to identify, especially after giving them some wake-up time. Dividing the clumps, again, preserving the crown is key. The snips on the left are pointing to eyes. The middle picture, just as a reminder, don't cut the crown, and the arrow below, you can see where the scissors are. Whoops. Just emphasizing, just stay away from the two crowns. So we have two tubers, two crowns, and the cut goes in between the crowns. And winding up with a clean cut in the middle, and we're having it. So in terms of identifying non-viable tubers, on the left are shriveled ones. Sometimes they can be reconstituted by, I'll go over this, by adding some water and just checking them on and see if they can get rehydrated. A broken neck is non-viable. You can see the brown tuber here is the so-called mother tuber. The original one, they usually rot, so they just toss those. And then on the one on the right, it's kind of interesting. You'd think if you had an extra large growth like that, it would do super well, but these are called feeder tubers, and they add nothing except occupy space in your storage facility. So you can just cut those off. Dividing and drying after doing all that cutting, they should be dried for 8 to 24 hours to heal the wounds, so that you're not storing with wet a portion that can lend itself to getting a fungus infection. At the same time, don't leave them out in the sun or on concrete to dry, and they should be checked frequently because they can shrivel up within 24 hours. In terms of storing now over the winter, store at a temperature ideally between 40 to 50 so that they stay dormant. Over 40 so you avoid freezing them. Humidity, if the tubers become wet, risk of mold and rot. If they're too dry, they shrivel. And so it's key to inspect them at least monthly. A lot of people recommend every 2 weeks, and remove any moldy or rotten tubers so that the mold doesn't spread to the other tubers in your collection. If the tubers are sprouting due to warmer storage area, leave the sprouts alone and then trim them back to 1 to 2 inches when you're ready to plant them. They do need at least 3 months of rest between growing seasons, and that's relevant to people a lot of times want to grow tubers in containers outside and then just bring them in, but they actually have to go to 40 to 50 degrees if you bring them in to have some dormancy. Number of different storage mediums have been proposed. You can see from left to right, saran wrap, wood shavings, peat moss, cocoir, vermiculite. I personally use vermiculite. I've used peat moss, but all of them have to have some dampness to them so that, again, the tubers don't dry out. They can be put in bins, either plastic or cardboard, or actually they can be bagged. Dahlias in containers can be moved indoors, again, but need a minimum of 3 months of rest between growing seasons, again, with storage in that 40 to 50 dormancy range. If you don't plan to dig and store dahlias, and I've met a lot of people who don't, they just will dig them up and throw away and just buy new ones every year so that you don't have to go through this whole wintering process. There are a number of places you can purchase. You can go to local garden centers or big box stores. They're typically not named varieties. They're relatively less expensive. There are lots of online tuber suppliers that I'll show you. I think it's in the handout. Those catalogs usually open between October and January. Some are competitive. Delivery, though, of course, is delayed until April and May. And you can always find suppliers of a specific variety that you might be interested in, dahliaaddict.com. And there's finally local plant sales. So people have, in the American Dahlia Society, they have a newsletter, and they had an interesting feature, which was what are desirable features? How do you choose? You know, you have so many cultivars out there. What's some guidance? So what they did was they surveyed 24 dahlia flower growers, what they felt was the most desirable trait and profitable for them, and then compared that with the result of competitions. So Dahlia Society, local Dahlia societies have lots of competitions, and if a particular cultivar wins 50 blue ribbons or awards, that goes into what's called the Fabulous 50. So what they did was they cross-referenced them to find out the top ones and see what the most desirable traits are. And here's what they came up with. Most popular forms, probably not surprising to you, are the formal decoratives, informal decoratives, stellars, the palms, and those that can achieve a stem length of 12 to 15. You know, the dahlia heads are so big, people want big vases, so you have to have a long stem. And of course, as many blooms as you can get on the plant, so you're not just looking at the green foliage. Early season blooming is preferred. And here's what they came up, they call them the dual performers. I have two slides. So the first slide is the decorative family. This is kind of a classic. Peaches and cream is a big one. Rose Toscana, you see on all the lists of favorites because they're just so plentiful. And then the ball forms, where this one is always on the list, Cornell bronzes. Here are some suppliers. These are the ones that have been vetted by Floret Farms. Again, this is on your handout. So fall soil prep. A lot of growers, a lot of people who write about this, extension services really emphasize the need to do soil testing. Because dahlias do best when the pH is 6.5 to 7.0. Well-draining soil prevents tuber rot. If it's not draining, consider raising your beds or mounding them up without any edges to at least 3 inches above soil. Apply a layer of compost in the late fall that will feed the bacteria and fungi in the soil over the winter. So what about soil testing? This is, it's a workshop where there's interaction. How many people have tested their soil in the last year? Well, I hadn't in a long time, and I thought, for this talk, I'm going to go through this and just see what you need to do. So I went to the Iowa State Extension Service, and they don't do testing anymore. This is what their website says. In December 2017, they stopped due to continued need for soil testing services by our clients. We're now forwarding our clients to the University of Minnesota. This is because it's a public university. As a convenience, you have the free choice to choose different locations, and they give a bunch of other locations. So I went to the university and got there's the form that you get. It's all online. It's $19, and you fill it out, and 2 weeks later, you get this. And I did not have a great year with dahlias. And so I was actually shocked when I saw the pH. I have a pH of 7.7. And should be 6.5 to 7.0 for reasons I'll go over. And I was low on nitrogen. I had stunted growth, and I asked around a lot, and said, oh yeah, everybody's having stunted growth this year. Well, I didn't have enough nitrogen. So, of course, nutrients are important. And if your pH isn't high enough, you have iron chlorosis, leaf yellowing due to iron deficiency. So you can see I was in the 7.5 range, and so I wasn't getting enough iron. What do you do to acidify? Well, the Iowa State has a neat little calculator here. So if you know what your current pH is, so again, emphasizing the need to know, get the measurement, you can calculate how much sulfur to put in to acidify your soil. Has off-scale phosphorus. It turns out that's a common finding with over-applying compost. Can result in a buildup of phosphorus. If you have high phosphorus, take a break from applying compost for a few years. If your phosphorus is above 25, again, mine was 100, don't use phosphorus-containing fertilizer for a few years until your levels drop. If you have enough phosphorus in your garden but still need nitrogen and potassium, consider options, other ways to supplement. Why was my nitrogen so low? Well, truth in advertising, I was just following what I thought was the right thing to do. Low nitrogen, as the plant's growing, I used it 2-15-15, and then as the flowers were coming out, I deleted nitrogen. I went to a 0-10-10. So spring care. So we brought the tubers out. Now we're ready to plant. There's 3 ways to plant. We can plant the tubers that we've overwintered or ordered. We can do cuttings, or we can grow from seeds. In the spring, when tubers are warmed after winter storage, a sprout forms from the eye, grows into a clone of the plant. If the blooms are produced similar to the parent plant. Healthy tubers will be firm and plump, not shriveled or spongy. And if you do have a shriveled tuber, here are some things you can do. Sprinkle a few drops of water into a plastic bag, put the tuber in, don't soil it in, don't seal it, put somewhere warm, and check it often, and potentially you can plump it up again. Waking up the tubers, planting tubers without evidence of sprouts risk rotting in event of unexpected rain, since they don't have any roots to absorb the water. Waking up the tubers involves leaving out 2 to 3 weeks before planting, keep at room temperature, and look for sprouts coming out of the eyes before planting. When to plant? Wait for after the frost date, when soil temperatures have reached at least 50 to 60 degrees, preferably at least 60. Planting is usually finished by the first week of June. Planting dahlias too early in cold, wet soil may result in rotting tubers. If planting tubers directly in the ground, shoots will emerge. Expect them in 2 to 6 weeks and another 2.5 to 3 months before the first bloom. So around August, if you put them in the ground. You can expect them in July if you start indoors early, and I'll go over that. Dahlias planted indoors the first week of April will be well started by mid-May, potted in at least 4 inches diameter. Larger pots are preferred, but take up more room. When setting up the tubers indoors, use potting soil. Start and keep them in a warm area above 70 in a location where they'll receive at least 8 hours of light once the sprouts emerge. If needed, place the pots under fluorescent lights about 6 inches above the tops of the pots. Don't overwater. Let them get fairly dry between waterings, and when transplanting, it's preferable to remove the bottom 1 or 2 sets of leaves, making sure that the nodes are then below the soil surface when the plant is planted in the garden. Where to plant? They need a sunny location, at least 6 hours of sunlight. If you can't get 6 hours, it's recommended to choose a compact or dwarf dahlia so you don't have that shifting of the branches towards the sun. Bed layout, it's kind of interesting, various opinions. Swan Island, if you do a kind of what's considered a standard 3-foot wide bed and you want to get two rows deep, you can plant typically in a zigzag formation. The one on top is having at least 18 inches between each plant. The one on the lower one is from Floret Farms, where they kind of tighten things up a little bit to 12 inches. Swan Island recommends 12 to 14 inches, and the American Dahlia Society recommends 24 inches. 24 inches is probably the right way to go, because the recommendation at the time of digging is 12 inches from the stalk, because there's so much, the clumps are so big that you can injure if you're too tight when it's planting time. The other thing is, it's nice to have space. We'll talk about companion planting in terms of pest management, where you want to have some space to put your companion plants that you want to have attracting your beneficial predator insects. So dig a hole 6 inches wide, 4 to 6 inches deep. Ideally pre-moisten the soil a few days before, so that watering at the time of planting is not needed. That would risk root rot. Be sure that your soil is workable and not soggy. The ground should be warm, well drained at planting, and an open, sunny location. If you have heavier soil, amend it to loosen it. Lay the tuber horizontally at the bottom of the hole with the eye up. Trim that sprout if it's over 2 inches to 1 inch, and that'll promote a stronger stalk. Before filling the hole with soil, be sure to mark the location with a stick, because you'll be using a garden stake, and by the time the growth gets up to 18 inches and you put the stake in, the concern is injuring the tuber. So the recommendation, pretty much all sources say get a stake in at the time of planting as a marking. If planting cuttings, wait until after frost, usually around Mother's Day, because the seedlings are so tender. Container planting, containers should be at least 2 feet wide, again, to accommodate that 1 foot on each side from the stem as the tubers develop. 1 foot deep. Choose varieties that are short, less than 3 feet. Fill the pot with pre-moistened potting soil, 6 inches from the top. Place the tuber again flat, sprout up. Put a stake in to mark it. Where the crown is, top off soil. As the plant grows, tie it to a stake every 12 inches. Container dahlias will need more water than soil dahlias. If soil is moist at 1 inch, don't water, but may need water every day as opposed to once a week when they're in the soil with deep watering. Fertilizing recommendations are also different, need more frequent fertilizing with containers. Weekly is what Santa Cruz Dahlias recommends, every 2 to 3 weeks, Swan Island, but it's more frequent than soil. Cuttings, a tuber brought indoors and placed in potting soil with a source of light, moisture, and heat will produce green sprouts, as noted on the right here. And as the sprouts grow, they can be removed from the tuber crown and put into a rooting medium after dipping in some rooting gel, and they can grow into a full-size plant. Here's the rooting cube. You can see the sprouts coming out. This propagation method is actually favored by growers to multiply stalks, since each tuber can produce 5 to 10 cuttings. The plant will produce blooms in the first year and tubers underground. Usually you only get 1 or 2 tubers with cuttings. Cuttings are clones, so again, blooms are the same as the parent plant. I'm mentioning this because it's different with seeds. Seeds, if a dahlia bloom is allowed to mature, it can be pollinated and will develop a seed head. Since the bloom has many ovules and each one is fertilized by an individual pollen grain, each seed mate is genetically different, so this is not going to be a clone from the parent. A seed head can hold as few as 1 or more than 100 seeds. Viruses can reside in tubers but not in seeds. Start germination 6 weeks before the planting date, and you can have dahlias that year. So bloom time from planting depends on the cultivar. 75 days for compact dwarf varieties, 90 days on average. 120 days for 8-inch blooms or larger, the so-called dinner plate varieties. And expect blooms to continue until frost. That's why at least that's why I like them. You have 3 months of flowers with dahlias. If you plant Mother's Day, expect flowers early to mid-August, so you get 2 months, but you can get 3 months of bloom if you start indoors, starting between April to 15th, and then you'll expect blooms mid-July, so you'll go to where we are, we just mid-October. Watering, start watering after the first green shoots appear above soil, typically 3 to 5 weeks after planting. Normal rainfall usually fulfills water requirements for dahlias until the sprouts appear above the ground. Premature watering may rot tubers. Since watering is an important part of care, monitor the level of moisture. Dig down about 4 inches and hand test soil to confirm moist but not wet. Observe leaves for wilting. I mean, you can overwater dahlias just like anything else. Water once a week, deep watering to 8 to 10 inches, but every other day on hot days when plants are fully grown and blooming. For larger plants, a good rule of thumb is to water if the rainfall is less than 1 inch in 7 days. Overhead light watering only on hot days to cool leaves and prevent burning. Overhead watering sometimes we worry about, especially late in the evening, promoting powdery mildew. Staking, they need staking since fully grown plant can be damaged by high winds or when flowers are weighed down by heavy rain. There's individual stake methods. There's a corralling method. In terms of the stake method, at the time of planting, place a stake in about 2 inches from the tuber crown to allow for support. And sometimes if you just have a marker, and then you can put a larger stake in, to just once you know your location. Avoid bamboo with hollow stems because earwigs hide in those hollow stems. Collective staking or corral method involves setting up a perimeter of stakes and then just wrapping twine around those stakes in various forms. So on the left, you can see we're just staking a single stake. On the right is a corral method. Floret Farms uses this method of doing it every 10 feet, putting a stake in and then running twine between the stakes. This is Santa Cruz Dahlias. They go every 4 feet. Just it varies, different preferences for how the corral method is done. And you can see how they're just zigzagging the twine in between. Mulching retards weed growth, reduces spread of fungal spores, because if the mulch is kept wet, then you avoid the spreading of spores, which happens when the soil is dry and dusty. Helps retain moisture, adds organic matter. When using bark dust or mulch, wait until after dahlias have sprouted and pushed through the ground. Early application prevents soil from warming up. So sometimes, if you planting when the temperature is in the 50 to 60 range, you want to get things heated up warm, and the mulch can suppress that further increase in temperature that you want 4 to 6 inches above the soil line. Pinching. Pinching the main growth tip to promote growth below. Removing that main growth by 18 inches promotes lateral growth. You can see an example here. We just, pinching that top one, and you can see that the lateral growth below the pinch happens at each level. So it's not just where the pinch happened. Removing that growth tip reduces the hormones and triggers branching below with more blooms. It will delay the blooms by 2 weeks, of course, because you're pinching off that first one, and it needs time to now recover. But it's worth it. Sort of, some people call it just general field care is what we're going to talk about now. Cutting blooms. People have different opinions. Some say cut the flower when it's nearly open in the morning when hydrated. Others say cut it when it's 1/2 to 2/3 open because it'll continue to grow or continue to open in the vase. Prefer, again, a 12-inch cutting stems so that because the blooms are so big, you want to have a big vase. People have different opinions on how to prolong the vase life. They talk about the dipping, the treating the tips with boiling water. One method is 7 to 10 seconds. Another method is alternative method. Swan Islands recommends to allow them for 1 hour. So big variation in how long you leave. I haven't had much luck with it prolonging stem life, but just FYI, there's different opinions about this. Disbudding. New buds typically appear with 2 small side buds. The side buds will compete with the main bud for energy and decrease the size of the bloom. It also will impede on the appearance too, as you can see. You can't really see it here, but a lot of times it'll just be compression of the main bloom. The main bud opens first. The side buds remain closed and grow higher than the main bloom. The idea with disbudding is as the side buds emerge, they can be removed by just rolling them off rather than having to get a tool. Just at the point, just at the, you can see how it looks here. The leaves stay, obviously. When cutting the main bloom, cut just above the second set of leaf pairs, so that if you cut when you do your 10-inch or 12-inch cut below the screen, you're stimulating even more growth with again getting the lateral blooms going. Deadheading. Remove the blooms or buds past their prime. This encourages production of more blooms, prevents seed head formation, and then it's also good to know the difference between a fresh bud and a spent bud. This is, it's flowered already. You may have missed it and buried in the foliage, and it's getting ready to go to seed, and that should be removed so that the energy isn't obviously going into the seed formation. It's important to remove lower leaves on a mature plant. They're blocked from the sun. And they turn yellow, and when they die, they can be a source for fungal infections. Fertilizing, I think I sort of touched on this with the container. First application is at about 30 days after planting, repeated every 3 to 4 weeks throughout the season. Dahlias like fertilizer with about twice as much phosphorus and potassium as nitrogen. High nitrogen content promotes weak stems, huge green plants, small blooms, blown or popped center blooms, no blooms. Exception is high nitrogen content fertilizer may be considered once or twice if you have yellowing leaves, or if your soil test obviously shows you need amendment. Some people talk about using manure. It's recommended to use the processed manure in bags. If you use manure from the field, it should be done in the fall. And the problem that people sometimes talk about other kinds of manure, this is from Iowa State, just how high chicken manure is extremely high levels of nitrogen and twice as much phosphorus and potassium, or twice as much phosphorus. So we'll move into pests and pest management. Pests are typically, the insects are typically divided into the sucking insects and chewing insects. The sucking insects tend to reproduce very quickly, can have 3 to 4 generations per season. Thrips are tiny, difficult to see without magnification. They jump quickly when disturbed. It's easy. One way to diagnose them is just to get a piece of white paper and tap the dahlias, and you'll see all these little tiny thrips. Other is you can get a bowl of water and you can see what's going on. The reason to do it is if you see really deformed flower buds, that's a sign of thrip infestation. With their mouth parts, they open the plant cells on the surface. They suck the contents out. On mature plant parts, their feeding causes silver streaks, which are rows of you can see on the leaves. They're most apparent on flowers, especially white and yellow ones. Plants that are stressed by heat and drought are particularly susceptible. And these are examples of thrip infestation. You can see how asymmetric and deformed the heads are. Biology and life history. In the spring, adults fly to the host plants, enter flower blossoms, feed on pollen. Eggs are laid in the flower buds and leaves, and the immatures emerge from the buds to feed. Several generations pass each summer. Adults can feed on adjacent flowering plants as well. An integrated pest management strategy is recommended. Knocking off the thrips is a simple way, of course, just with the forceful spray of cold water. Insecticidal soaps or horticultural oils are effective. Insecticide with spinosad is approved for organic gardening. Sticky tapes are suggested. There's an interesting pest webinar that was on the home gardening webinar series from Iowa State. And it's actually recommended blue sticky tapes because thrips are more attracted to that, and it reduces biocatch. So I did a little experiment. I got yellow tapes and I got blue ones, and the blue was actually loaded with thrips and very little else. But the yellow ones, I did have some lacewing. As I'll mention, it's a beneficial predator. Also, planting companion plants to attract predators is a very organic way to treat these pests. Pests not only do the damage, but they're vectors for virus. And that once you get a virus in a dahlia, there's no cure. They have to be removed. Green lacewing bugs are a beneficial predator. Again, companion plants that we'll go over and it's in your handout, or they can be purchased. Minute pirate bugs are another beneficial predator that can also be purchased. And again, there's ways to attract them into the field. And I thought I'd take a break before I start talking about all the other insects and just introduce you kind of with what's on the shelf in the various nurseries and hardware stores in the community and explain some of the differences. So first of all are mineral oils, otherwise known as horticultural oils. Here are a couple examples. Again, this is just mineral oil. These work on contact with the insect and suffocate them. They're virtually non-toxic to humans and other mammals, relatively safe to beneficial insects. In the landscape, they control a wide range of common soft-bodied pests, including aphids, thrips, whiteflies, and mites. It's difficult for pests to develop resistance to them. but they can damage plants if applied when the plants are water stress or temperatures are above 90 degrees, or if there's high humidity prevents rapid drying. We want all these agents to be given at night, and so they can be dried so that bees don't get in contact. Essential herbs, herbal oils. This would be examples like rosemary oil, olive oil. These ingredients work most commonly as contact killing agents, so retreatment may be needed, but there is evidence that they actually disrupt neurotransmitter physiology like a lot of the other insecticides do. Neem oil comes in kind of two flavors. One is cold pressed and the other is processed so that the arachidactin is removed on the right. So on the left are examples of cold pressed neem oil. These will have the active insecticide azadirachtin, but on the right are it's called clarified hydrophobic extract of neem oil. This is without the insecticide. So neem oil is found in seeds from the neem tree, which is native to arid regions of India. The seeds are poisonous, so wear protective clothing and mask when spraying. It's been used for hundreds of years to control pests and diseases. It's a mixture of components. When the natural neem oil is removed from the seeds and treated with alcohol, virtually all of the azadirachtin, the insecticidal portion, is removed. The remaining oil is that extract that I talked about. Azadirachtin deters certain insects from feeding. It interferes with the normal life cycle by affecting their feeding, molting, mating, and egg laying. The extract is also active against fungal diseases. The insecticide portion can be irritating to skin and stomach, and has low toxicity to pollinators, beneficial predator insects, very low toxicity to humans and animals, but may be toxic to fish. Moving on to insecticidal soaps. These are potassium salts of fatty acids. They damage the protective coat of soft-bodied insects, causing them to dehydrate. They control aphids, whiteflies, mites, and other soft-bodied insects. However, complete coverage of the pest is needed, and sometimes repeat applications are needed. They can cause phytotoxicity, which browning or burning of the leaves, and again, should not be applied when temperatures are above 90 degrees. Both are toxic to, both insecticidal soaps and oils are toxic to pollinators, and again, shouldn't be used on plants that are in bloom unless they're used late in the evening when the bees are back in their hives, because they're not affected when the product is dried. Spinosad is a low toxicity option. It's considered a microbial insecticide because it's derived from bacterium. The mechanism of action is neurotransmitter disruption. There's a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, and it continues. It's not. Usually, it's taken up, or it gets into receptors. It just sits there and causes overstimulation and paralysis, basically, of the insect. Works both by contact and by ingestion. While wet, spinosad is toxic to bees, just like the oils and soaps. Only in the evening application, and we'll talk about this more. Some growers, the asterisk just refers to Santa Cruz dahlias, actually recommends a preventive strategy of spraying it every 10 days during the growing season. The idea being it's easier to treat infestations before the adults are overwhelming your plants. This approach every 10 days gets the larva and keeps the various stages that they're in check, because so many of the insects, again, have 3 to 4 generations during a season. These are products that are available locally. This one in particular is of interest, as we'll talk about in a preventive strategy, because it has the soaps as well as spinosad. So we can get at the fungal component of what hurts dahlias during the growing season. Pyrethrum, there's 3 terms to know. Pyrethrum refers to the product that's extracted from the dried flowers, and pyrethrins are the actual active ingredients. They function as sodium channel modulators, again, doing this neurotoxicity. They disrupt the impulses along the axons of the neurons. They provide control for hours up to 1 day, so it's a very short-acting insecticide, most effective against soft-bodied insects, again, like aphids. Now, pyrethroids, that's another animal. These are the synthetic insecticides that were created by copying or modifying the natural pyrethrins. They provide much longer coverage, up to 7 to 10 days, are more toxic, and only the non-synergized, that just means that there are pyrethrins that can have another agent that will prolong their life, the synthetic pyrethrins should all be avoided. They're not suitable for organic gardens. Since pyrethrin pesticides are non-selective, they can't have negative impact on beneficial insects. They're very toxic to bees, so again, it has to be applied only at night. These are pyrethrin-only products that are available locally. The recommendation of most people is to limit them only if you have a significant infestation of beetles, and we'll talk about that right after I'm done with all the insecticides. Pyrethroids, again, should be avoided. That's 7 insect killer is a pyrethroid. Here's a pyrethrin combination example. This was at one of the garden stores. A synergist is added, so it's pyrethrin, but it has a synergist to make it longer. And of course, organophosphates are highly toxic and should not be used in the organic garden. Diatomaceous earth, it's a non-toxic powder. It's composed of fossilized one-celled organisms called diatoms. The particles have microscopic sharp edges that are harmless to people and pets but are deadly to insects. It's used to control slugs and soft-body insects like aphids. Use a natural grade. Prolonged exposure can irritate the lungs. It also kills honeybees, and avoid applying the product to flowers. Some people just relegate it to just controlling slugs and keeping it on the soil alone and away from the plant. Rain can reduce effectiveness and wash it away. Kaolin clay is a barrier that irritates insects and disguises host plant by coating it with a white film. So it's not really an insecticide. It's usually to control Japanese beetles, tarnished plant bugs, thrips, leaf hoppers, cucumber beetles. And again, I'm going to go over to show you pictures of all these in a second. Non-toxic. Sulfur, probably the oldest known pesticide, can be used as a dust, powder, liquid. It uses the fungicide to control powdery mildew, rust, brown rot, leaf spots. It's incompatible with other pesticides though, so don't use sulfur within 20 to 30 days of applying a spray oil to plants because they're most likely it will damage the foliage. Mites and thrips are also controlled. It's non-toxic to mammals. It has the potential to damage plants in hot weather. Again, there's a temperature extreme. Don't apply over 80. I've had discussions with people about molasses during infestations. It can be frustrating if it seems like some of the other agents that I've talked about. There's been interest in the internet, in various Facebook chat boxes. I'd just like to, again, it's a workshop, so has anybody heard about using molasses as an insecticide? Okay, there's a lot of interest in the Dahlia circle, and it largely is from this webinar that came out some years ago. And it had to do with the idea that if you increased the sugar content of leaves, it would make them unpalatable to insects. And they had this graph, and this is all, if you Google bricks, you'll get this. And the idea was kind of interesting, as the concentration of sucrose went up, you moved closer and closer to just intolerable to insects. And they had various levels that were intolerable to different groups of insects. So what is the bricks chart? What is all this about? Well, it's really used for a couple reasons. Farmers use it to check ripeness of fruit. They can test the sugar content. Brewers and vintners use it to check anticipated alcohol content, used to assess the sugar content when people are checking the sap for maple syrup. But the limitation for leaf testing for dahlias is that you have to get a lot of leaves, crush them to get some liquid. And then you get the liquid. It's easy for fruit or grapes. You put the drop in the detector here, and then take a look. As you look at the sun, and it refracts differently according to how much solute is in the liquid, and you get a Brix number. So Is it good? Well, there's lots of anecdotal statements that are on various blogs. This was a good article, though, that was done by a master gardener in a journal, and she made 3 points. There's no scientific studies that show molasses is effective. There is potential benefit to beneficial predators. The sugars in molasses spray might increase the presence of lacewings, ladybugs, and minute pirate bugs, but they might increase ant and flies, too. The application is 1 tablespoon per gallon. I went out and got it and tried it because I had a real cucumber beetle problem and didn't do much, but had to try it. I was given this talk, so I had to try it. Okay, so continue on with pictures of the pests. Aphids. Aphids are small, pear-shaped, soft-bodied, yellow, pale green, or gray. They're in colonies. They are sucking insects. They puncture the plant parts and remove sap, inject a toxin. Plant deformities appear similar to thrips. Like whiteflies, aphids remove more sugar-rich fluids than they need, so they eliminate the residual on the leaves, and that's called honeydew. And then, unfortunately, fungus is attracted to that, and that can lead to sooty mold growth. This is, you can see the, I thought I had the sooty mold growth. Yeah, here, you can see on the surface there, that moldy stuff. Aphids rarely kill plants, but they can cause leaf and bud distortion. They do carry viruses just like thrips, and if plants are infected, there's no cure. Management is physically removing them, encourage natural predators, horticultural oil. If aphid infestation is concentrated, you just move the branch. What about ladybugs? There's a lot of interest that's sort of discussed. You can buy ladybugs to eat the aphids. This was an interesting article that was written, I think, North Dakota State Extension. He made some interesting points. Number one, ladybugs hibernate together in huge clusters of up to 40 million. While sleeping, they're harvested with portable vacuums, refrigerated, and then packaged for sale. The biggest problem with buying them is that they still think they're hibernating, and when they wake up in nature, they fly for miles after being released because they just want to burn up the fat layers before eating any insects that are in your garden. Within 48 hours, studies have shown that less than 5% remain. Even if a few beetles remain for a few days, they're not hungry and are not likely to lay eggs in your garden. In general, buying ladybugs and other predatory beneficial insects have their limitations. You need to have a lot of pests in your garden for the predators to eat, or you have companion plants that the predators like to get the pollen from. And we'll also talk about that. Science have expressed concern that distribution of these ladybugs can lead to parasites to the local populations. Another limitation is that ladybugs almost eat exclusively aphids. It's good to get predators that eat multiple, like the lacewings that we'll talk about. Instead of buying sleeping ladybugs, recommend providing an environment that's inviting. Again, companion planting. They feed on nectar and pollen, attract them with things like dill, cilantro, alyssum, sunflower, yarrow, and if you do have a big outbreak of aphids, you can always use a safe insecticide, spinosad and neem oil can kill them. Tarnished plant bugs, 1/4 inch long. They have that distinctive Y on the back. You can see it right there. I had a lot of them this year. Probably because I was looking for them with the tapes and all that stuff. They're seldom seen, but when disturbed, they quickly fly to another location. Just like the thrips, you can find them by tapping the flower and seeing if if you're having an infestation in the garden, warranting more spraying. They have piercing, sucking mouth parts. Flowers appear distorted. They overwinter in leaf litter. So the recommendation is to not have all that litter in the garden over the winter. Treatments include neem oil and soaps. Leaf hoppers, these are highly mobile, small, wedge-shaped. They quickly jump, fly. They have piercing, sucking mouth parts again, because they're in that class. The saliva that the hoppers inject into plants have toxic compounds. There may be 2 or 3 generations per year. They don't overwinter in Iowa. Rather, they're blown in from the south. The initial symptoms of leafhopper feeding include paling of leaf veins. This is the kind of the characteristic hopper burn on the edges after infestation. As symptoms progress, yellowing and browning moves towards the leaf margins. They can become stunted and yellow. Treatment again is soaps. Spider mites, they're less than 1 millimeter. You have to look at the bottom of the leaves, look for a dusty appearance so you can have that gritty feeling of the webs that they leave. Most overwinter as eggs. They may have 8 to 10 generations in a year. They feed on the leaves. They infest drought-stressed plants most often, so just keeping the watering up helps prevent a lot of these infestations. Like thrips, mites suck plant juices and cause them to be yellow and mottled. This is the progression that occurs after that initial yellowing. You can see just progresses to just look worse and worse. Here's the continued yellowing, and then finally dropping of the leaves after being infected. White flies, they're small insects. In the middle, of course, is a magnification. They have 2 pairs of broadly rounded wings. They suck the juices out. All stages feed on the undersides of leaves. A sooty mold grows because of they're taking in more of the plant than they need, so they excrete the other sugars, and that's the so-called honeydew. Green lacewings are a predator. Again, spraying on a regular basis every 10 days is recommended just to stay on top of all those generations that are going to occur in one growing season. Chewing insects, this is a big one, at least for me this year. Cucumber beetles, they're similar to ladybugs, but are green instead of red. They fly in daily. They prefer to feed on young petals buried in unopened dahlia buds, so that when the bloom opens, the ends of the petals are chewed. They eat holes in the leaves. Actually, this is a picture I took of, I saw one, removed it, and then there was a hole that he left. There's 2 to 3 generations per year. They can transmit bacterial wilt, and as we'll talk about with bacterial and viral diseases, really a big mainstay of treatment of those diseases, since there's very limited therapies, is pest control, the vectors. Management, hand pick, neem oil, insecticidal soap, pyrethrin insecticide, if there's a real serious infestation, again, because they're worried about the toxicity to predators, or beneficial predators. Zinnias attract beneficial predators. Trap planting, this is one that I guess personally I'm not big on trap planting. Trap planting just has to do with plants that are basically sacrificial plants that are there to attract the pests, but then you have to deal with the pest. You have to deal with those pests. You have to, otherwise they're going to continue to have eggs, and so they have to be sprayed with insecticides or physically removed. The one exception that I personally like is dwarf amaranth, because you plant it as a trap plant, birds can see the cucumbers, beetles, and then they take care of the disposition of the cucumbers. Diatomaceous earth, again, we've talked about the concerns about that affecting honeybees. Parasitic wasps, this is a predator for the cucumber beetle. Let me just back that up. Yeah, I just skipped it here. I talked about benefit, I looped these together. The parasitic wasp for cucumber beetles, again, these can be purchased, these can be easily brought in, and I have the companion plants in the list. They're small, easily confused with gnats. They primarily feed on pollen and nectar. They're solitary. Each species has another species of insects it needs to complete its life cycle. You're familiar with hornworms being infected by parasitic wasps, I'm sure. It's the same idea. They find a site to inject, to have their eggs delivered. And there's a specific parasitic wasp for cucumber beetles, Celtoria. Eggs hatch inside the insect. Larvae finish feeding, become pupae, and the adults emerge. Earwigs, these are easy to identify because of the prominent pinchers at the end of the abdomen. They can damage both blooms and leaves. However, they can be beneficial in the sense that they can they will eat aphids. They winter in debris. There's only 1 generation per year. Treatment is traps. Recommended is to kind of simulate what they like, where they kind of hang out during the day. So it's this kind of the classic trap is just get a pot, just fill it with wet leaves, turn it over, and just check on it every once in a while during the day, because that's where they're hiding. They feed at night. Sluggo Plus is the typical the pellets that are used for slugs, but it continues the spinosad as an insecticide. Leaf miners are small black flies, often with small yellow triangles on their back. Eggs are laid inside the dahlia leaf so that when the larvae hatch, they feed on the tissue inside the leaf, resulting in the classic visible trail or mines. The treatment usually is, since the damage is so minimal, is just to remove the damaged leaves. Japanese beetles, introduced in New Jersey in 1916, they've spread west. It's considered a general infestation in Iowa. Larvae overwinter in soil 8 to 10 inches below the surface. As the temperature warms, the larvae move higher in the soil, feed on the plant roots, become grubs, and emerge as adults in late June and July. They feed on the flowers and leaves. There are organic treatments available. Again, pyrethrins are kind of, again, not favorable. They are considered an organic insecticide, but because of the risk to beneficial predators and honeybees, it's the balance between how bad is it. Again, cucumber beetles are vectors for bacterial wilt. Slugs and snails, moving away from insecticides, one of the biggest threats. Leaf damage around the edges of leaves that compares with the small holes in the center that earwigs leave. Leaf damage around the edges actually also could be grasshoppers, of course. They're active at night. Consider night harvesting. Prevention is with Sluggo or Sluggo Plus. Typically, they're laid out. You lay the insecticide out, not the insecticide, the Sluggo, the pellets out when the plants are new, when they're short, and then coating them on the leaves as they grow up, because the slugs can go up on the plant. This was an interesting, just because of time, I'm going to go through, just highlight some of these things. This is from the Oregon State. I kind of like this. Again, treat with Sluggo. Traps, you've all heard probably of the beer traps. You can just get a yogurt can or yogurt plastic container, put beer in it, and then they'll go in, and then you just have to clean it up every once in a while, replace the beer. Diatomaceous earth has an application for slugs and snails. Other pests, I won't go over this. Gophers, deer, moles, rabbits. Deer, unfortunately, is basically fencing. So we do all this with insecticides. How good is it? Well, this author has written about, done studies, and he actually pulled a whole bunch of them together just to see how good insecticides are. So he summarized the results of 153 trials looking at the efficacy of common active ingredients in organic insecticides. The performance of organic products varied widely. As you can see, spinosad was the best at 74%. Pyrethrin actually was disappointing, and azodiractin, again, from neem, also only about 50-50. Thrips and cucumber beetles were particularly difficult to control. Spinosad was relatively ineffective against sucking agents, which was surprising, at least from what we've already talked about from all the other literature. And we're not sure how often they spread it here, what the frequency of spraying is. The point of me bringing this up is part of an integrated pest management strategy is companion planting. This is an effort to encourage natural plant-derived controls for plant disease, reducing the need for insecticide. The premise is that we want to find plants that either repel insects or attract the beneficials. Unfortunately, there's not been a lot of research done, especially on garden scale. Most is from studies of interplanting crops in large fields, not intra-planting, which is what people talk about in the home gardening. Having space between the dahlia plants, attract the beneficials, and then they're right there in the neighborhood of the plants that might be infected. I'm going to move ahead. Some of the companion plants that's in your list, I won't go over because I want to just sort of move on to diseases. This is in your handout. Okay, fungal diseases, I'll list them here, but we'll move on. Powdery mildew, common name for several fungal species, spread by airborne spores. Humid days and cool nights create an ideal environment. The presence of powdery mildew reduces the ability of the plant to photosynthesize, so we get smaller blooms, weaker stems, fewer tubers. Usually doesn't kill the plant. Prevention is by spraying with horticultural oil, which generally works better than neem oil. That's why that combination of spinosad with horticultural oil is kind of attractive. Swan Island Dahlias recommends begin spraying 60 days after planting and continuing a regular application to prevent mildew. Increasing plant spacing helps so that you have more airflow. Basically, any organic fungicide works against powdery mildew. There's just a list of all of them. In red is just powdery mildew, just to emphasize that there are lots of agents. Copper soap is useful. It's also used for other indications. Leaves have a protective waxy layer. The copper ions enter the plant cells where the cuticles are thin. If you get to the new margins, it can burn those areas, so you just have to be careful of using it on fresh leaves. Botrytis, also known as gray mold. This is a fungus that's most commonly found in the blooms with poor air circulation during cool and moist conditions. You can see basically the bloom, just all in the bloom, it just dies from the infection, from the mold. As it progresses, the bloom petals fade, wilt, and ultimately rot. Prevention is delay watering, remove infected plants. Sprays that include the neem oil as well as copper and sulfur have also been used. This just shows you the gray mold that's also been forming in the area of the stems. Sclerotinia, there's two species. One is the significant one, the white mold. The first one is minor, stems or leaves in close contact with the soil. The white mold, that infects higher up. It can and forms larger sclerotia. That's the example here. So if you open up a stem, you see all the mold, and then you see the black things. That's where the active fungus is. Prevention is pruning damaged stems, remove the spent blooms and plants. Wilt, also known as vascular wilt, just lumping the verticillium and the fusarium together. And you can have wilt from bacterial causes as well. When they enter the roots and the stems, it causes stunting. They plug the vascular system, portion of the system that carries the water up, that is the xylem. They can live indefinitely in soil. It grows into the roots. Symptoms are early yellow leaves. The stem darkens near the soil level. That's kind of the classic. Top of the plant wilts and dies back. And they can remain in the soil for many years. Just a little botany review. Xylem is what's blocked by wilt pathogens. That's in the inside of the vascular bundle. Phloem is on the outside, and that is responsible for transferring sucrose and amino acid. This is kind of an interesting slide of a stem of a dahlia that was cut, and you can see the vascular bundles. And we talked about how the stems of a dahlia are hollow. You can see eventually there's just nothing in there. All the action stays on the perimeter. Root rot and crown rot. This is water molds. Root rot, which the example is here. You can see the dahlia's been dug up, and this is what you've got, a rotten dahlia. Crown rot, if the plant crowns are kept consistently wet, it happens and it's diagnosed pretty easily. You can see just a very dark crown right at the soil surface. That just suggests overwatering. And there's nothing you can do about that. Dahlia smut, in wet conditions, the symptoms are pale spots that occur. As they mature, the spores appear on the surface of each spot. And you can see how it darkens. See, so it starts white and then it gets black. Management is reducing the density of the plant canopy. Again, you need air circulation to prevent fungal disease. Remove and destroy affected plants and all symptomatic leaves and treat with a fungicide. It can overwinter in soil attached to stored tubers. Bacterial diseases. Crown gall is considered the most common bacterial disease in dahlias. It's unfortunately not diagnosed until you actually dig it up. The bacteria produces auxins. They result in excessive disorganized knobby growth. Healthy shoots are not produced. Again, its diagnosis is made when you unearth the tuber ball or the tuber clump. There's no treatment, unfortunately. You can see just this ugly kind of malformed, there's just a mass of cells. They can grow along the tuber and appear dried. And I'm showing this just so that they're not confused with lenticels, which are normal. Lenticels are an adaptation to deal with excess water. Tubers can have remnants of lenticels, but a tuber stored in dry medium will have no need for this adaptation, so they don't, you won't see those. But after, when you take them out of the ground, you may see those on the surface of the tubers. Leafy gall is disorganized mass of green shoots and leaves from the crown. The causal organ is not known for dahlias, it's known for other plants. Tuber disposal, again, no treatment. Bacterial wilt, again, this is from the cucumber beetle. Wilt progresses down the vine until the entire vine wilts. Again, comes up, it just gets in the xylem. Eventually leaves yellow. The bacteria overwinter in the gut of cucumber beetles. So the key for managing it is controlling cucumber beetle populations. Aster yellows is leaf-like tissue formation that forms where flower part should be. The flower actually continues to just be green or light green, and that tells you there's an infection from Aster yellows. It lives in food-conducting tissue. This is in the phloem rather than the xylem. It's rarely lethal. The leafhopper is a vector. Again, this whole concept of control the pests controls the infections. Black stem rot, again, they know the bacteria that causes it, usually starts at the soil level, moves up. You have to move the plant. Some sources say no planting for 1 year. I just saw a communication about root knot nematodes. It's not usually discussed in the books, but this is what it looks like. These are eggs laid by the nematode, and effective treatments, unfortunately, aren't available. It's of course, is part of some discussion now, because this is when people are pulling their dahlias, or digging, and there's a lot of discussion on the Facebook groups about, what are these things, and it's fun because experts weigh in and give opinions, and it's a real learning opportunity. Viral diseases. Most common indications of a viral infection are changes in the appearance of leaves. The three classic are mosaic pattern, ring spots, and vein chlorosis. Those are the three kind of families of way of diagnosing a viral disease. Other symptoms are nonspecific. Here are examples of the mosaic pattern. You can see abstract patches that form on leaves in various forms. This is kind of, interesting how the different mosaic patterns reversed. Here's the ring spots that can form, you can see, and vein chlorosis. This is where the center vein turns yellow, and that's opposed to what's seen with magnesium deficiency, where the veins actually stay green, and otherwise the leaf is yellow. Mechanisms of infection are typically infected. Plants are infected with virus through a wound or cut, or by an insect that injects their saliva containing the virus. And again, thrips and aphids are the main vectors. Both thrips and aphids actually have evolved to transmit specific viruses, and so I've just listed them here. Dahlia mosaic virus is highly prevalent in dahlias. The symptoms vary from mild mosaic to severe infections that result in yellowing and stunting. Other symptoms you can actually have chlorosis in addition to the mosaic pattern. And this is just a number of examples from Dr. Papu, who's kind of the big world's expert on Dahlia virus diseases. In summary, for a summary of viral diseases, virus affect each plant individually depending on specific virus, Dahlia variety, the virus load, growing conditions. If all plants in the same area are infected in the same way at the same time, it's unlikely that it's a virus. Disinfect cutting tools between cuts is the best prevention. No cure for viral infections. The key is controlling aphid and thrip populations. So 2 summary slides. One is just kind of a fun little thing to remember, the trifecta. Fertilize regularly, protect dahlias from weeds and pests, and ensure adequate water. And this is just kind of a summary of the whole talk, just some ideas to throw out to be successful. One is, first, dig tubers 2 weeks after hard frost, divide them in fall before storage or after winter storage. But you should really prefer storing them at 40 to 50 so that they stay dormant. Check tubers every 2 to 4 weeks while in storage. Soil preparation, consider soil testing. in the fall to make sure that your pH is in that ideal range of 6.5 to 7.0, and that you'll have an intelligent way to supplement any nitrogen or phosphate or potash imbalances. Plant in spring when soil temperature is at least 50 to 60, water deeply once a week, stake them, pinch main growth at 18 inches. Regular field care is disbudding, deadheading, removing lower leaves and spent petals. That's a source for fungus. Fertilize regularly. Consider preventive sprays only after sundown again to protect the honeybees. Insecticidal soap and spinosad every 10 days. Reserve pyrethrin for significant beetle infestations. Think about blue sticky tapes for thrips. Intraplant companions plants to attract the beneficial predators, kind of more of a natural way of controlling the pests. Cosmos, marigolds, sweet alyssum are kind of a few that seem to attract multiple different predators, beneficial predators. For nearby herb gardens, dill, cilantro, fennel. For slugs, early treatment is key. For the young plants, remove damaged, diseased leaves to prevent spread of diseases during the growing season. And finally, don't forget to disinfect cutting tools between cuts. You've been a great audience. Thank you. We did it.